your smiling faces. Hi, Cheryl, Sharon, Victoria, Julianne, how are you?
Good morning.
Jenny, nice to see you. Amanda. Bernice, hello. Tina, you're welcome to have your videos on. Just encourage you to please mute your microphones. And we are going to get started. I'm feeling pumped. I've just done my 3.5K run, part of my fitness challenge this morning. For those of you that don't know me, Natasha Malani is my name. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I welcome my co-host Anjani Amrit. Give us a wave, Anjani.
Hi.
And two fantastic speakers we have today, Olga Muzichenko and Joanne Fedler. Just give us a wave, Joanne and Olga. So a bit of background on our speakers, and then I'm going to hand over them to them both to do a quick introduction, and then they're going to share their leaders' insights. Anjani will then present a summary, and we welcome your questions. So the chat box is available for questions, and want to see lots of thinking and connecting going on this morning. So Olga is an award-winning educator, researcher. You can see that she's got the University of Adelaide background there today. She's a seasoned facilitator, speaker, and coach with over 20 years in teaching MBA courses in countries all around the world. And she also has experience in mindfulness and neuroscience-based techniques. And she's lived in a variety of places around the world, but we're just having a lovely conversation about that. Joanne Fedler is an international best-selling author of 15 books, which has sold over 750,000 copies around the world. She's a writing mentor, speaker, and interestingly, Joanne, you're an open water ocean swimmer. That sounds fascinating. Has an LLM from Yale, and once was made Asshole of the Month by Hustler. I'm sure we'll hear more about that for advocacy work against violent pornography. And she has a book, Things Without a Name, that has an upcoming mini-series, 6-part mini-series. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about your writing course, Joanne. So, Joanne, I'm going to hand over to you first just to do a quick introduction about yourself.
Well, thank you so much for that, Natasha. I was really going to offer the interesting thing about myself was that Hustler magazine made me Arsehole of the Month 1 year for the advocacy work that I was doing to educate people on the impact of violent pornography on women's equality in South Africa, which seems to be the award that I am most proud of in my life. It certainly made me a hero at the time when I was lecturing law students. They thought it was very cool. The other thing about myself is that I spend my life supporting women to find their voices. I used to do it as an advocate, and now I do it in terms of the writing that I do with people. And I actually, interestingly, last year became a certified swimming coach, because I have this feeling that teaching women how to swim in the ocean is part of kind of a holistic way of empowering us to face our fears and overcome obstacles that we face in our lives, and that who we are in water is who we can be out of water. So I hope that's enough of an introduction, because you did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. What a wonderful insight. Olga, would you just like to share a bit more about yourself?
Thank you so much, Natasha, and good morning, everyone. So Natasha did a terrific job introducing me. And in addition, what I want to share, I'm a pra-academic. So you can see that I'm representing the University of Adelaide, and I'm academic, but I'm a practical academic, which means that I actually combine my academic career with also running my private coaching and leadership training practice. So about 11 years ago, I started practicing mindfulness as a way of dealing with chronic stress that was affecting my life and was leading to poor health. I found it life-changing, and from that moment onwards, I started thinking, how can I bring it into my professional life? And so that's why I obtained qualifications that Natasha has mentioned, studied my coaching business, and I also designed mindfulness training program. So I work with teams of people, training them in mindfulness. Mainly, these are senior leaders. And I'm on the mission to hopefully reduce organizational suffering. So that's it.
Thank you, Olga. I love the term pracademic. For those that haven't heard of that before, that's fantastic. So I'm sure everyone online can see we've got two amazing speakers today to share insights and some wonderful accents to listen to as well, which I think is beautiful to the ears. So Joanne, I'm going to start with you to share your leader's insight with the group.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Well, this topic that we're dealing with today, which is putting ourselves first, was something I realized that I have been thinking about for a long time, but in different contexts. So I teach people how to write, and what I have found is that the foundation of teaching women in particular, because I mostly work with women, I work with a few men on some, on a particular basis. But when people come to me, the foundation of getting people to write and to find what is called your unique writing voice is that I have to teach people to have what I termed conviction. It's the term that I use, which is the foundation for me of all writing and of all expression, of all creative expression. And it really, in a way, boils down to understanding and answering three questions, which I call soul questions. Who are you? Where do you come from? And why are you here? And so for me, this idea of putting ourselves first, which in a way, for me, sort of sounds like selfishly elbowing other people out of the way, like on a Boxing Day sale, and going, no, it's me, I'm here. This is for me, which women in particular are taught not to do. We are taught in every possible way to make sure that everybody else is sorted out, everybody else is looked after. And I often feel like when women come to me, which interestingly enough is kind of always at a turning point in their lives, it's often at a time when they're either past midlife, when their children have left home, when their marriage has broken down, when they've left work, they've been retrenched, they're getting back into the workplace. They're always transition moments. And they are finally asking themselves questions that they have never, ever asked themselves. And so what I often feel is that I'm like a hospice for women who have delayed their own lives. They have all this unlived life inside of them, and they finally are getting to the point where they are asking themselves questions that they've asked on behalf of everybody else. And just as an example, I had an incident with my daughter where she had somebody that was a close family friend did something to her that crossed a boundary. And she called me and she was crying and she was shaking. And she said to me, "Mum, am I overreacting? Am I overreacting?" And I said to her, "Look at what your body is saying to you. Am I overreacting is a thought. When you trust yourself, when you return to yourself, when you put yourself first, your insights, your intuition, when you stand on the ground on which you stand without apology, without asking permission, without, questioning yourself, you don't ever ask, am I overreacting? You know who you are, what you stand for, what your values are, and you trust yourself. And so for me, this idea of putting ourselves first is about actually listening to ourselves, trusting our own intuition, trusting the ground that we stand on. And this is often not an easy thing to ask yourself. what is it that I want? What are my true values? What do I stand for? What would I die for? What would I put myself on the line for? But knowing who we are and putting ourselves first is about understanding those boundaries, knowing when we're being gaslit, understanding when something feels right, when something is a true yes or a true no, and being able to then action the life that comes from that space. Also taking up the space in our lives that we deserve. And not always making sure that everybody else is being taken care of before we are. I also think that when we put ourselves first, which I think we can reframe as honoring ourselves, listening to ourselves, trusting ourselves, you know, we learn something about who we are. We start to listen to these deep inner voices, perhaps even the mindful part of ourselves that Olga was talking about, that deep inner knowing that comes from self-trust. Whenever we're in service mode, nurturing mode, mothering mode, taking care of mode, what we often fail to do is to service ourselves, nurture ourselves, mother ourselves, and take care of ourselves. So for me, putting ourselves first is about valuing who we are. And with that comes the ability to put in the boundaries that we need. Conviction to find our own writing voice depends on you believing that you, A, have something worth saying, and that you trust yourself to be able to express it. So for me, what putting ourselves first looks like is learning how to rest, learning how to play, saying yes, saying no, making time for the things that are important for us. Something that can be really hard for us, especially if we have, you know, grown up as people pleasers, is learning how to disappoint other people when disappointing other people is in fact honoring yourself, making time for creativity, taking time for grief. Also, this idea of losing yourself, whether it is in music or swimming or some other place where your boundaries of self, in fact, evaporate and you become part of a much bigger whole. Learning how to move and nourish and play and find meaning, belonging to the space you take up in the world and claiming it millimeter by millimeter. So I also want to just say that when you are raising teenagers, I've written a book about raising teenagers. One of the most important things you have to do as a parent of a teenager is to know who you are, to put your own values very clearly at the front of that, and to stand that ground, because what teenagers are always going to do is to push those boundaries and try and see where they give. And if you can stand that ground and say, no, this is who we are. This is the kind of family we are. We don't behave like that. When my husband and I were thinking about immigrating from South Africa, his boss offered him a massive increase in salary for us to stay. And he came home and he said to me, how can we refuse this? And I looked at him and I said, we don't make decisions based on money. That's not who we are. We make decisions based on the safety of our children. And so when you know who you are and you know what your values are and you put that first, it's very easy to make decisions. You're not distracted by other things that actually are not true to the core of who you are. So just in terms of leaving you with some, I hope, some sort of practical skills, I would say some reflection questions that maybe would be interesting to think about is, what are you waiting for in your life? What are you waiting for? What are you putting off? What do you really want to say yes to in your life? What are you afraid will happen if you say yes? Who will you disappoint or let down? Whose permission do you need? What do you need to say no to in order to achieve that yes? And what decisions do you need to make in order to achieve that yes? What I'll do is I will put all of those questions into the chat so that you have them if you would like to look at them. But I want to say thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you all. And I'd love to now hear what Olga's input is going to be. So thank you all for your time today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Joanne. There's a lot there and we will recap on that. I will hand over to you now, Olga.
Well, thank you, Natasha. And that was a very poetic way of talking about today's topic, women putting themselves first. I guess inside my sharing will be a little bit different, a little bit more focused on my personal difficult experiences that I want to share. And I also would share with you something that I learned from my work as a coach. So what I learned from my human journey. During my human journey, I had two particularly challenging experiences. And those experiences actually resulted from me not putting myself first. So the first experience was when I was consistently suppressing my basic psychological needs, my social needs, and prioritizing my role as a wife and a mother. And it brought me to the brink of almost clinical depression. And that's when I realized that this is harming me and I need to change things. So the second experience was building career, looking after family, being all the time on. So I lost the off switch. All the time busy, all the time doing something, becoming like human doing instead of being human being. And the outcome was failing health. My immune system started to crumble. And when doctors started investigating that, they said, well, you have chronic stress. I said, come on, what are you talking about? I'm just, going about my professional life. I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I'm finishing my PhD. Well, chronic stress. So I realized I was so acclimatized to it that it felt like business as usual. And of course, health issues were a very, very loud wake-up call. So I resolved both of these challenges very successfully, and I learned a lot down the track. So I want to summarize for you my learning. So my learning number one was putting ourselves first is not about self-indulgence. It's about meeting our basic psychological, physical, and social needs. When those needs are not met, we start suffering. And suffering means that we experience pain that starts affecting us at the existential level. My second important learning was that when we put ourselves first, it actually has got two aspects to it. The first aspect is self-care, and the second aspect is self-compassion, and both of them are very closely intertwined. So I'll explain a little bit more. So self-care is about nurturing ourselves, giving ourselves space to replenish, to recharge, to sort of fill up our tank. And the most nurturing, the best self-care experience that I had was giving myself alone time, which is actually very much connected to self-compassion. So why self-compassion is such an important aspect of putting ourselves first? Because self-compassion is about attending to our suffering. And if we do not attend to our suffering, if we do not find its root cause, the experiences will keep repeating themselves. And it's only when we find the root cause of our suffering, we can change the behaviors that are actually causing us harm. So I did quite a bit of work to find that root cause. And that root cause, more often than not, is our unconscious beliefs that drive our unhelpful behaviors. So in my first experience, my rather unhelpful unconscious belief was that I couldn't take care of myself. I wanted safety and security in my life, and I believed that only other people can provide it for me. In my second experience, my unconscious belief was equating my sense of self-worth with being busy. And of course, when we bring those unconscious beliefs into the light, we can examine them, we can challenge them, and they no longer run our lives. So what I learned as a coach, everyone has to put themselves first. Men suffer in different ways compared to women, but they suffer too. Really, when we put ourselves first, we free ourselves from our own suffering. As a result, we actually do not create suffering for others. So my suggestion and my actually strong belief is that putting ourselves first is not a choice. It's not being selfish. It is actually a must for everyone who cares about others.
Wonderful. Thank you, Olga. There is lots of insights, Anjani. I welcome you got the hard challenge of summarizing them. I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you so much, Joanne and Olga. You're actually saying the same things, which is what I love, and saying it in different ways so that the different parts of us can hear them. And I absolutely adore that. Joanne, you talked about conviction. That's my big takeaway. Conviction and conviction towards yourself, trusting yourself, and trusting who you are, where you're coming from and why you're here, and digging deep into that and trusting the messages that come from that. And I know that you said you're going to put the questions in the chat, so if you haven't done already, that would be great. Those reflection questions, super important for us as women to spend time thinking about, because we spend most of our lives doing. So it's important that we stop doing and start to have some self-reflection. And so I urge all of you who are on the call today and who are listening to the recording to use those self-reflection questions. They're going to bring up some really interesting answers for you. So thank you, Joanne, for that. Olga, you said the same thing in a lovely, beautiful, different way. You talked about putting yourself first, which isn't selfish, and that we have to meet our basic needs. This is what it means, meeting our basic needs psychologically, emotionally, mentally. And if not, we'll have pain. So if any of you are suffering in your life, in your work, then it's because you're not meeting your basic needs, and you can actually make a change to that. She talked about self-care and self-compassion being interchangeable, and that it's attending to our own suffering so that then we're not creating suffering outside of us. So, and that it's not a choice, and it's also not being selfish. So I hope this message is getting through to everyone today. And my reflection, I'll just say quickly, because I'm aware of the time, to me, it's about self-ing. So I talk about being putting ourselves first as self-ing, because it takes away the connotation of being selfish. So, you know, the surveys all show, a report by the World Economic Forum found women spend on average 4 hours a day on unpaid care work, where we are socialized and educated into caregiving. And we all will have that natural response. If I put myself first, I'm being selfish. And I hope you're hearing this message today that it's not being selfish. It's actually the intelligent thing. It's the thing that's needed. It's not a choice. If you want to be healthy and create a healthy, happy world, then we as women really have to start putting ourselves first and call it self-ing. So I say, speak up, stand up, and self up. And if you can remember those three things, then you'll do well in life.
Thank you, Anjani. There's some very strong, powerful messages coming through today. Joanne, I loved your analogy of the Boxing Day sale, of sort of getting your elbows out there. Now, I encourage you to put your questions in the chat, or just let me know if you want to ask a question, and you can unmute yourself. I'll start with kicking one off. Joanne, you mentioned when you were talking to your daughter about that over when she thought she was overreacting, and you talked about that thought wasn't real. How do we intervene when our thoughts are strong but they're not real? What's some tools we can use?
That's a great question. You know, I think that thoughts and feelings can sometimes be at war with one another. And when you know, Olga talked about unconscious beliefs. And for me, an unconscious belief, is part of this. When you know who you are, you can start to separate between what is deep and true for yourself versus something that you believe or that is a thought that you have adopted. And it's really just about not, denying what the thought is, but it's about having a conversation. When somebody gaslights you, for example, and you've had an intuitive reaction to something, and somebody says, no, I didn't say that, you're overreacting, that's not what I meant. There is the thought, oh, I am overreacting, somebody else's version of something is more true than my own. All of this topic is about honoring the truth of what is happening for you in your body, and not going, oh yes, I'm crazy or I'm overreacting, which, a lot of people who come to me, I'm simply witnessing their version of reality and saying to them, this is also true. It's not about denying one version versus another, but it's about understanding where you stand within that bigger structure, and being able to speak up. When if you don't know what you stand for, it's impossible to speak up. But somebody will always shout over you, and somebody will always undercut you, and someone will always undermine you. But if you can speak your truth, as the way that the wonderful late Ruth Bader Ginsburg did, which was quietly, not with anger. She didn't burn people, she didn't scream, she didn't shout, she spoke her truth quietly. And I think for me, learning to speak your truth quietly, which requires you to first know your truth quietly, which requires, as Olga said, self-care, quiet, knowing who you are, and that mindful space. All of those things help us to drown out the noise of everything else that comes in to tell us that what we're feeling is not true.
Olga, would you like to add?
I would like to add, I think what's important is to have an inner compass, and that inner compass is the most important values. Maybe, if your three most important values, that's your inner compass. And what happens when we have that emotional inner unease, it's the emotional response to those important values being violated. Right. And so and also what I would suggest, it's also is worthwhile learning about how your body reacts. Because once we know a particular body response to violation of our values, we then can discern between our values being violated and indeed maybe we're being in the wrong.
Yeah.
So that's how I work, for example, with my clients. Very often, the first thing we'll start with will be coming to your true self and discovering those most important three values for oneself. And it's amazing that people can live their lives and be in their 40s and even in their 50s without actually stopping and reflecting, who am I? What do I value? What are my non-negotiables?
Non-negotiables, exactly.
So Joanne, what can everyone leave today just taking one small action? What would you recommend when we hang up from this call in a minute or so? What can everyone start by doing?
I would just take out a journal, a pen and a paper, and I would start working out what are your three non-negotiables? What are the three most important values in your life? And how, linked to that, what happens in your body when that value is honored, and what happens in your body when that value is violated?
Fantastic. Olga, what would your practical tip, what would be the first thing everyone can do?
Spend some time alone. Just schedule it. Put it in your schedule. Make it non-negotiable. You need to have quiet mind to know yourself. You need to have quiet mind to have insights about your life and uncover what's unconscious.
Wonderful practical insights there. I would like to thank Joanne and Olga for your insights, your time, your passion, and actually the contribution you're making to the wider society. It's an absolute pleasure to have you join us today. Thank you to Anjani, my partner in crime in this, bringing this fabulous group together. The good news for everyone, and just launch the poll, Anjani, if you could, but I just wanted to make sure everyone knows that next month on the 5th of May, we will be doing the half-hour online pep talk as we do now, but it will be done live in Adelaide. So for those of you that are in Adelaide, you can join us. The invitation is coming out with the venue and details, and that will then be followed by a 1-hour workshop with Anjani Amrit. So for those of you in South Australia, I urge you to attend that on Friday, the 5th of May. It'll be held in the CBD at Communet's office. And so the first half hour will be live streamed so everyone can join in. And then it'll be an hour following for those in South Australia. So 9 till 10:30, block out in your diaries if you're in Adelaide. We'd love to see you there. Thanks, everyone. I hope this has put a pep in your step, and enjoy the weekend. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Great session.
Thank you. Have a great week, everyone.
You too.